My name is Scott Thorpe. I'm with the law firm of Kunzler IP, and I'll be discussing amending patent claims. Typically, when one files a patent application, it includes a number of claims, and these are the most important part of the application because it's what ultimately will be owned by the patent holder. It's what they're able to enforce. However, during the course of examination, or as we call it, prosecution, there may be a reason to amend or change those claims. For example, suppose that this black shape here represents what you cover with a patent claim. It might be this set here, where you claim 4 vertical supports and a spiral spring for a spring chair. Now, suppose the examiner, in examining your application, says, well, I found lots of examples that have 4 vertical supports. So that covers this part of your invention. And then there's also this spring here that kind of looks like yours, and so I think that covers your invention here too. So I'm going to reject your patent application because it's obvious in the art. And you say, well, hold on now. What if I change what I claim so that I add additional limitations, and all of a sudden all of my invention is no longer covered by these prior art sources. So to give it a practical example here, suppose I said I'm going to add a chest rest right here. And so it's something that you lean forward on in the spring chair, and all of a sudden now I'm claiming something else. I've narrowed the scope of my claims by adding additional limitations. And the patent examiner will go back and say, well, okay, I found examples of this, I found examples of this, but I haven't seen this, and so I'm going to allow your patent application. Usually when we amend claims, it's for that reason. We amend them because we want to get the patent allowed. And so oftentimes we're forced by the patent examiner to narrow the scope of the claims, to add additional inventive elements in order to have the patent allowed. This is very common. Most patents are actually amended before they're allowed by the USPTO. Now, there's some international implications of this as well. In the United States, it's very easy to amend claims. Other countries aren't so easy. For example, in China, it is much more difficult to have amendments to your patent claims allowed. Often you have to be able to show the examiner that the exact wording that you want to change the claim to is already there, supported in your specification. So it goes back and forth. Some countries are easy to make amendments to, some countries are hard. Countries in Asia generally tend to be harder. Europe tends to be a little harder. Places like Australia, Canada are more like the United States, where it's fairly easy to make these kind of changes. Now, when you do amend a claim in the United States, it's considered that you've done it, and usually you do, you've done it to be able to get the patent claim allowed. So you can amend your patent claims, but if you do, at least in the United States, there's one potential downside to that, and that is something called the Doctrine Equivalence. And what that basically means is if you change the claims in order to get your patent allowed, then it's assumed that you can't say, well, inventions that don't exactly infringe my patent but come close to it are also considered infringing. That's kind of the Doctrine of Equivalence. And when you amend your claims to narrow them to get your patent allowed, it's considered that you no longer have rights to the Doctrine of Equivalence. But that's the basics of amending patent claims. It's done all the time. It's fairly common. You almost always need to do it in order to get a patent application allowed.